The champagne glass clinked sharply against the table as Rebecca stood up at Thomas's first birthday party. My heart had been so full just moments before, watching my precious grandson smash chocolate cake into his chubby cheeks, his laughter filling the room like music. Then Rebecca cleared her throat loudly, commanding everyone's attention. She announced to the entire room, filled with both families and friends, that they were officially changing his name. We're renaming him Vincent after my father, Vincent Ashford, a man of true dignity and legacy who built something remarkable in this world. My son Mark stood rigidly beside her, nodding weakly, his eyes cast downward. She didn't ask anyone's opinion. She didn't seek our blessing. She just declared it like a queen issuing a royal decree that could not be questioned. The room fell into an uncomfortable silence. Guests exchanged confused glances, unsure how to react. My blood turned to ice in my veins because I knew something Rebecca didn't. I knew Vincent Ashford personally, and the story she was about to force onto my innocent grandson was built entirely on lies, blood, and betrayal. My hands gripped the edge of my chair so tightly my knuckles went white as memories I had buried for 30 long years clawed their way violently to the surface of my mind. After the party ended and guests filtered out, I tried to speak with Rebecca privately in the kitchen while others cleaned up. She cut me off immediately with a condescending smile that made my stomach turn with anger and disbelief. I know you're attached to the name Thomas, and I understand that must be difficult for you, but this is about my family's legacy. The Ashford name means something important in this world. Mark stood awkwardly by the doorway, still refusing to meet my eyes, looking like a trapped animal. When I gently suggested they reconsider such a major decision, Rebecca actually laughed out loud. The sound was sharp and cruel, cutting through me like a knife. With all due respect, your family history is quite unremarkable. Nothing notable at all. My father built an empire from absolutely nothing. He deserves to be remembered and honored through his grandson. The insult landed like a physical slap across my face. My chest tightened with a mixture of rage, hurt, and something else, determination. She had absolutely no idea who I really was or what I had lived through. She had no idea what I knew about the man she was glorifying as some kind of saint. But she was about to learn everything. I would make sure of that. That night, sleep was completely impossible. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling until 3 a.m, my mind racing with memories and pain. Finally, I gave up and got up, wrapping myself in my robe. I walked to my closet and pulled out an old wooden box from the very back, hidden beneath thick winter blankets where it had sat untouched for 15 years. My hands trembled as I lifted the lid. Inside were photographs that still had the power to break my heart, letters written in familiar handwriting that made me want to cry, legal documents that proved terrible truths, and newspaper clippings yellowed with age. All about Vincent Ashford. Every piece of paper felt heavy with the weight of secrets I had carried completely alone for 3 decades. They wanted to erase my grandson's identity for a lie. They wanted to honor a monster, a criminal, a murderer. I realized then, sitting on my bedroom floor at 3 a.m, that silence was no longer an option for me. I had to protect Thomas from this poison. I had to tell the truth, no matter how much it would hurt everyone involved. No matter what it would cost me personally. I began to plan carefully what I would say and how I would reveal everything. The next morning, after barely sleeping at all, I called Mark. I forced myself to keep my voice calm and steady, though my heart was pounding. What exactly has Rebecca told you about her father? I'm curious about his story. He recited the information like he had memorized it from a script. Self-made businessman who started with nothing. Generous philanthropist who gave to charities, died tragically in a car accident when Rebecca was only 12 years old, left her mother Elizabeth financially comfortable and secure. I listened carefully to every word, taking mental notes. Then I asked one very pointed question. Did she ever mention what business he was actually in? What industry? Mark fumbled for words, clearly uncertain. Import-export, I think? Maybe international trade? Rebecca really doesn't like talking about the details. She says it's too painful to remember him, brings up too many emotions. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. Rebecca herself might not know the real truth about her father, She was living innocently inside a complete fantasy that her mother had carefully created and maintained. But Elizabeth, Rebecca's mother, knew absolutely everything. She had always known the truth, and she had spent decades deliberately hiding it, building lie upon lie. I thanked Mark politely and hung up. It was time to start revealing the truth, piece by careful piece. I pulled out a particular photograph from 1987 that I had kept all these years. It showed a young woman in an elegant emerald dress standing beside Vincent Ashford at a charity gala. They were smiling at the camera, looking comfortable together. Without any explanation or context, I sent the image directly to Mark's phone. Within an hour, he called me back. His voice was shaking noticeably. "Mom, who is this woman standing with Vincent Ashford? Why do you have this picture?" I let the silence stretch between us, heavy and meaningful, letting him wonder and worry. Then I spoke very clearly and deliberately. "That's me, Mark. That young woman is me. I knew Rebecca's father very well, long before you were even born, before you even existed." I could hear his breathing quicken on the other end of the line, could almost hear his mind racing. Before he could gather himself enough to ask more questions, before he could demand explanations, I ended the call. Click. I wanted him to sit with that revelation for a while. I wanted him to start questioning everything Rebecca had told him about her family. The truth was far too big and too painful to reveal all at once. He needed time to prepare himself mentally and emotionally for what was coming next, for the avalanche of revelations that would destroy everything he thought he knew. At exactly midnight, someone pounded urgently on my front door, making me jump. I opened it cautiously to find Mark standing there in the darkness, his eyes wild and desperate, his hair disheveled like he had been running his hands through it. "Rebecca thinks you're lying about everything. She says you're trying to manipulate us because you're upset about the name change, that you're being petty and vindictive." But when Mark looked directly into my eyes, really looked, he saw something he had never seen in his mother's face before. Deep, old pain that had been buried for decades mixed with absolute steel resolve. I invited him inside silently and spoke firmly, my voice leaving no room for argument. "I have kept completely silent for 30 years to protect people, to keep painful secrets buried. But I will not let my grandson carry the name of a man whose legacy is pure poison. If Rebecca insists on doing this, she needs to hear the whole truth, all of it, every horrible detail." Mark sank heavily onto my couch, his face pale and drawn. "What truth, Mom? What are you talking about? You're scaring me." I didn't answer his questions. Not yet. Not tonight. I told him firmly to bring Rebecca here tomorrow afternoon. It was finally time for everything to come into the light. Rebecca stormed into my home the next afternoon like a hurricane, with Mark trailing anxiously behind her. She was absolutely furious, her face flushed bright red with anger. "How dare you try to poison my husband against me? You're jealous and bitter because your family has no legacy worth remembering, nothing impressive at all." I remained completely calm despite her rage, my voice steady. I walked slowly to my dining table and placed the wooden box down carefully, deliberately. "Before you rename my grandson," I said quietly but firmly, "you're going to sit down right now and learn who Vincent Ashford really was. Because your mother has been lying to you systematically your entire life." Rebecca's face flashed with uncertainty for just a split second, a crack in her armor. Then fury took over again, stronger than before. "You don't know anything about my father," she screamed, her voice shrill. "You're making all of this up to hurt me. This is cruel." I simply opened the box slowly, the hinges creaking. "Sit down, Rebecca. Please. You're going to want to be sitting down for what I'm about to show you. Trust me on that." I pulled out the first document with steady hands, a wedding announcement from 1986, printed in elegant script on expensive paper. Vincent Ashford marrying Elizabeth Torres, Rebecca's mother. Rebecca glanced at it dismissively, clearly confused about why I was showing her this. "So what? I already know when my parents got married. What's your point?" Then I pulled out a second document from underneath, watching her face carefully. A marriage certificate dated 1985, a full year earlier. Vincent Ashford, marrying Catherine Wells. I slid it slowly across the table toward her. Rebecca's hands trembled visibly as she picked it up and read every word carefully. Her face went completely white, all color draining away. This is fake. It has to be fake. Someone forged this document to hurt my family, to ruin my father's reputation. I shook my head slowly, sadly. Your father was already married when he married your mother. He was a bigamist, Rebecca. He had 2 wives at the same time. I was personally at both weddings. I witnessed everything with my own eyes. Mark leaned forward, staring at the certificate in shock, his mouth hanging open. Rebecca looked like she might be physically sick, her hand moving to her stomach. No, she whispered desperately. No, that's impossible. That can't be true. Before Rebecca could fully process the first devastating revelation, I pulled out newspaper clippings, spreading them across the table like evidence at a trial. Articles about Vincent's so-called import-export business. But these weren't success stories or business features celebrating his achievements. They were from the crime pages, the investigative sections. Federal investigation into money laundering, accusations of fraud and embezzlement, racketeering charges being prepared. I showed her sealed court documents I had obtained years ago through a private investigator I had hired with my savings. Vincent Ashford wasn't a self-made businessman who built an empire. He was a calculating criminal who had married multiple women, forged countless financial documents, and systematically destroyed innocent lives for profit. Rebecca's voice cracked as she read through the articles, tears starting to form. My mother would have told me if any of this was true. She wouldn't have hidden something this big from me my whole life. She loved me. I met her eyes with deep sadness and absolute certainty. Your mother knew everything, Rebecca. She knew, from the very beginning, before you were even born. And she made the choice to stay with him anyway. The room felt like all the oxygen had been completely sucked out of it. Rebecca's hands were shaking violently now, the papers rattling in her grip. Who was Catherine Wells? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper, afraid of the answer. I took a deep, steadying breath, preparing myself. This was the part that would change everything between us forever. That would create a connection she never knew existed. Your mother knew about Catherine because Vincent's first wife told her directly. Catherine went to Elizabeth, begged her to walk away from Vincent, tried to warn her. But Elizabeth stayed anyway. Rebecca looked confused, desperate, searching my face for answers. Who was the first wife? Who was this Catherine person? I met her eyes directly and spoke the truth that had haunted me for 3 decades, that had shaped every day of my life since. My sister. Your aunt, Catherine, was my younger sister. The room went deadly silent, as if time itself had stopped. Mark's mouth fell open in complete shock. He dropped heavily into a chair like his legs had suddenly given out beneath him. Rebecca stared at me in utter disbelief, her eyes wide. Your sister? She whispered in horror. I nodded slowly, feeling the old grief wash over me again. Yes. Which makes you my niece by marriage. We're connected by tragedy to the man you want to honor with my grandson's name. I pulled out photographs of Catherine from the box with trembling hands, touching them gently. Beautiful, vibrant, trusting Catherine with her bright smile and kind eyes. Her smile could light up any room she entered. I told them the whole story, every painful detail. How Vincent had swept her off her feet at a charity fundraiser in 1984, how he had seemed so charming and successful. How he courted her relentlessly with expensive flowers and elaborate promises of a beautiful future together. How he married her in a lovely ceremony and then slowly, methodically, drained her trust fund under the guise of business investments that never existed. Then he systematically isolated her from our family, creating distance between us with lies and manipulation. When Catherine finally discovered he had been lying about his business, his finances, absolutely everything, she confronted him bravely. That's when she discovered Elizabeth, pregnant with Rebecca. Vincent didn't choose between his 2 wives. He kept both families running simultaneously, living completely separate lives. 2 wives, 2 homes, 2 complete existences built on elaborate lies. Catherine was absolutely devastated, but somehow believed he would eventually leave Elizabeth and commit to her fully. She couldn't accept that she had been deceived so completely, so thoroughly. It destroyed her slowly from the inside out, watching her light fade day by day. Rebecca's world was visibly crumbling before my eyes, her foundation of beliefs shattering. If all of this is true, why didn't anyone stop him? Why didn't you do something? Her voice was accusing, desperate for someone to blame besides her father. I told her the painful, honest truth that I had lived with for decades. Catherine loved Vincent despite everything he had done, despite all the lies. She believed deeply that he would eventually choose her, that their love was real. She believed every promise he kept making about leaving Elizabeth. I tried desperately to intervene in every way I could think of. I begged Catherine to leave him, to save herself. I even contacted Elizabeth directly, told her everything about Catherine, pleaded with her to walk away for everyone's sake. But Elizabeth made her choice consciously. She chose the money, the comfortable lifestyle, the illusion of respectability that Vincent provided. And Catherine couldn't let go of the man she thought she had married, the fantasy she had created in her mind. I watched helplessly as my beloved sister faded away before my eyes. She became a shadow of her former self, trapped in a nightmare she couldn't escape from. The guilt of not being able to save her has haunted me every single day since, following me like a ghost. I pulled out the newspaper clipping I had kept carefully preserved for 30 years, the paper fragile now, the one that changed everything in my life forever. Catherine's death, officially ruled an accident by the authorities, a tragic fall down the stairs in the home she shared with Vincent. The article was brief and clinical, just stating basic facts without emotion. But I showed them the police report I had obtained years later through that private investigator, spending money I couldn't afford. Evidence of a violent struggle in the bedroom before the fall. Bruises on Catherine's arms that didn't match a simple tumble downstairs. Signs that someone had grabbed her forcefully, violently. Defensive wounds on her hands. An investigation that went absolutely nowhere because Vincent had powerful connections, unlimited money, and friends in influential positions. The detective's private notes suggested obvious foul play, but the case was closed within a single week. I looked directly at Rebecca and said the words I had never spoken aloud to anyone. Your father killed my sister. He murdered her when she threatened to expose him. Rebecca gasped sharply, tears streaming down her face uncontrollably. Mark sat frozen in complete horror, unable to move or speak. Rebecca was sobbing now, her whole body shaking, but I couldn't stop the truth. She needed to hear everything, every horrible detail. After Catherine's death, Vincent inherited what little remained of her estate, the scraps he hadn't already stolen. He used that blood money to expand his criminal operations further. 6 months later, he married Elizabeth officially in a large public ceremony covered by society pages. Once there was only one wife left to acknowledge, he could play the role of respectable widower perfectly. My family tried desperately to pursue justice for Catherine. We hired expensive lawyers who promised results, demanded new investigations, spoke to anyone who would listen to our story. But Vincent's legal team systematically buried everything. They painted Catherine as mentally unstable, emotionally disturbed. They portrayed our entire family as vindictive and delusional, trying to destroy a good man's reputation. Vincent rewrote history completely to make himself appear as the victim of harassment, and Elizabeth stood loyally beside him through it all, helping him maintain the elaborate lie. She knew exactly what he had done to Catherine. She knew, and she deliberately chose him anyway, chose the comfort he provided. That betrayal cut almost as deep as losing Catherine herself had. I felt betrayed by both of them. I pulled out official documents from the federal investigation that began in 1994, stamped and sealed. Money laundering through dozens of shell corporations across multiple countries. Fraud involving fake import licenses and forged customs documents. Racketeering charges being carefully built by federal prosecutors who were getting close. Vincent Ashford was actively under serious federal investigation when he died in that convenient car accident Rebecca had always been told about. But I showed them the private investigators' detailed notes that suggested strongly that Vincent's death wasn't an accident at all. He had made extremely powerful enemies over the years, people he had stolen millions from, business partners he had betrayed completely, lives he had destroyed without remorse. The brake lines in his car had been professionally tampered with, according to one mechanic's unofficial statement that was never recorded. Someone wanted him dead. The case died conveniently with Vincent. The federal investigation was quietly closed without explanation. But the truth didn't disappear into nothing. It stayed buried in boxes like mine, hidden away. It lived in the memories of people like me who knew exactly what he really was underneath the respectable surface. A career criminal, a murderer, a complete monster who destroyed everyone he touched. Then I pulled out a letter. The paper yellowed significantly with age and handling. Elizabeth had written it to me in 1995, just months after Vincent's convenient death. My hands shook as I carefully unfolded it and began to read aloud, my voice breaking. Elizabeth admitted clearly that she had known about Catherine from the very beginning of her relationship with Vincent. Knew about the bigamy, the lies, everything. Knew Vincent was dangerous and capable of violence. But she stayed because she claimed she loved him and wanted Rebecca to have a father figure in her life. The letter begged me desperately to never tell Rebecca the real truth about her father, to let her daughter remember Vincent as a hero, as a good man who loved his family. Elizabeth wrote that Rebecca deserved to have happy, untainted memories of her father to carry through life. I had honored that painful request for almost 30 years. I had carried that heavy secret like a stone crushing my heart every day. Your mother chose the comfortable lie over the hard truth, I told Rebecca, looking at her directly. She built your entire life, your whole identity, on that lie. And now you want to pass it on to my innocent grandson, to poison another generation. Rebecca shook her head violently in denial, unable to accept it. She grabbed her phone with trembling hands and called her mother right there at my table. Speakerphone so we could all hear. Her voice was shaking with raw emotion. Mom, tell me this isn't true. Please tell me Dad wasn't married before you. Tell me he didn't hurt Catherine. Tell me she's making all of this up to hurt me. There was a long, terrible silence on the other end of the line that seemed to stretch forever. I could hear Elizabeth breathing heavily. Could almost feel her panic through the phone. Then her voice came through, small and broken and defeated. Who told you? How did you find out? Just those simple words, but they confirmed absolutely everything. Rebecca's face went completely white, all blood draining away. Her phone slipped from her shaking hand and clattered loudly on the table. The denial was no longer possible to maintain. Her mother's response had confirmed every horrible accusation. Elizabeth hadn't denied anything. She hadn't defended Vincent or called me a liar. She had simply asked who had finally told the truth she had hidden. Rebecca collapsed forward, her head falling into her hands, sobbing uncontrollably like a child. Mark moved automatically to comfort her, but seemed completely unsure what to say or do. What words could possibly help in this moment? Elizabeth arrived at my home within the hour, driving recklessly fast. She burst through the door without knocking, furious and terrified and desperate. How dare you? She screamed directly at me, her face contorted with rage. How dare you destroy my daughter's memories of her father? You had absolutely no right to do this. No right. I stood my ground firmly, my voice steady and cold as ice. You wanted to name my grandson after a murderer and a criminal. You wanted to erase the name we lovingly gave him in honor of my father. A truly good man who never hurt anyone, for a legacy built entirely on lies and blood. I kept completely silent for 30 years to protect Rebecca from this pain. But I will not let this happen to Thomas. I won't let you poison another generation. Elizabeth had no defense against the truth. She couldn't argue with the facts spread across my table. She couldn't deny the documents, the evidence, the proof. All she had were tears and rage and desperation. You've ruined everything, she whispered brokenly, sinking into a chair. Everything I carefully built for her over all these years. I shook my head firmly. No, Elizabeth, you ruined it. You ruined everything the day you chose Vincent over the truth, the day you chose comfort over justice for Catherine. For the first time during this entire nightmare, Mark finally spoke up. He had been sitting quietly, processing everything, watching his wife and mother-in-law completely unravel before his eyes. Now he stood up slowly and turned to face Rebecca directly. His voice was firm, clear, and absolutely final. We're not changing Thomas's name. We're never changing Thomas's name to Vincent. Rebecca started to protest weakly through her tears, but Mark cut her off decisively. Not rudely or cruelly, but with absolute certainty that left no room for argument. Your family's legacy isn't what you thought it was. My family's legacy is honest, good people who tell the truth even when it's incredibly hard. Our son will keep his name. Thomas. End of discussion. It was the first time I had ever heard Mark stand up to Rebecca like that, with such strength and conviction. Pride swelled powerfully in my chest, making me want to cry. He was protecting his son from poison. He was choosing difficult truth over comfortable lies. That's exactly what good fathers do. That's what my own father would have done. I had raised him right after all. Days passed slowly and painfully. Rebecca avoided me completely, refusing to return my calls. Mark told me she was processing everything with a therapist he had insisted she start seeing immediately. I gave her space and time, understanding she needed it, but the waiting was emotionally painful. Then one quiet afternoon, she appeared unexpectedly at my door. Alone. Her eyes were red and swollen from days of crying. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking with emotion. "I was so arrogant and awful to you. I thought my family was better than yours, more important. I thought the Ashford name meant something impressive in the world. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know any of it." She broke down completely right there, sobbing on my doorstep like a lost child. I pulled her into my arms tightly and held her, feeling her shake. This young woman who had just lost her father all over again, but in a far worse way than death. "You're not responsible for his sins," I told her gently but firmly. "Catherine wouldn't want you to carry that guilt. It's not yours to bear. But you are responsible for what you choose to do now that you know the truth." We stood there together for a long time, both grieving very different losses, but united in pain. Rebecca went to confront her mother with everything she now knew, demanding answers. She demanded the full truth, every detail Elizabeth had deliberately hidden for decades. According to Mark, who insisted on being there, Elizabeth finally confessed everything under pressure. She knew Vincent was violent and dangerous. Knew he was capable of terrible things. Suspected very strongly what had happened to Catherine, but was too afraid to admit it or go to the police. She had stayed with Vincent because she was pregnant with Rebecca, completely alone, and terrified of raising a child by herself. He offered her financial security and stability, even if it came wrapped in darkness and lies. After Vincent died, Elizabeth had systematically rewritten history because she couldn't face the reality of who she had truly loved and what she had enabled by staying silent. She had built Rebecca's entire childhood, every memory and belief, on a foundation of lies because the truth was too horrible to speak aloud to anyone. Now that carefully constructed foundation had crumbled completely, and Elizabeth had to face what she had done. She had to acknowledge her role in the tragedy. While going through old documents with Rebecca, trying to piece together Catherine's final years and honor her memory, we discovered something completely shocking and unexpected. Catherine had a substantial life insurance policy that Vincent had apparently never known about or never managed to claim. It had been sitting completely unclaimed for 30 years, accumulating interest. As Catherine's sole surviving family member and sister, I was listed clearly as the beneficiary. The amount was substantial, more money than I had ever had. Rebecca looked at me with wide eyes when we found it, probably wondering what I would do. I made my decision immediately, without hesitation. I would put the entire amount in a trust fund specifically for Thomas. Money for his education, for his future, for building a good and honest life. The money Vincent had tried to steal from Catherine would finally serve the next generation the right way. It felt like justice, finally, after all these long years of pain. Catherine's legacy would be love and opportunity and hope, not pain and lies and tragedy. Her money would help create something beautiful. One quiet afternoon, Rebecca came to me with a gentle request. "Can you tell me more about Catherine? I want to know who she really was as a person." We spent hours looking through old photographs spread across my living room floor. I told her stories about Catherine's incredible kindness, her infectious laugh, her ambitious dreams. I showed her pictures of us as children, playing in our backyard, as teenagers, dressed up for school dances, as young women full of hope and plans for the future. Rebecca wept openly for the aunt she had never known existed, never got to meet. for the tragedy that had shaped both of our families in ways we were only now beginning to understand fully. "Can we visit her grave together?" Rebecca asked softly, her voice tentative. We did. We drove together to the cemetery where Catherine was buried under a simple headstone. Rebecca laid fresh white flowers carefully and knelt down in the grass. Through tears, she whispered, "I'm sorry, Aunt Catherine. I'm so sorry for what my father did to you. I promise I'll do better. I promise I'll make sure Thomas knows about the truly good people in his family, not the monsters." I stood beside her, finally feeling some measure of peace after 30 years. At Thomas's second birthday party, everything felt completely different from the year before. The atmosphere was lighter somehow, despite the heavy truth we all now carried and shared. Rebecca stood beside me, holding my hand tightly, drawing strength. She addressed both families gathered there, her voice clear and strong and certain. "I want to thank my mother-in-law for teaching me something crucial about life. Real legacy isn't about impressive names or money or status. It's about truth, integrity, and genuine love. Thomas's name will never change, and I'm grateful for that now. I'm grateful for the truth, even though it hurt terribly." Elizabeth stood in the corner, still fragile and damaged, but slowly accepting her role in the past. Mark squeezed my shoulder and smiled at me with genuine warmth and respect. The healing had truly begun for our family. Our family was being rebuilt carefully on honesty and truth. It would take considerable time, but we were finally moving forward together instead of living in lies. That's all I had ever really wanted: truth and family united. Now Thomas is 3 years old, growing so fast. I'm in my garden with him on a beautiful sunny afternoon, teaching him carefully how to plant flowers. His small hands dig enthusiastically in the rich soil, completely absorbed. He looks up at me suddenly and points toward a photograph on the mantel visible through the open window. "Who's that lady with you?" he asks with innocent curiosity. It's a picture of Catherine and me as young women, laughing together in the sunshine, arms around each other. I kneel down slowly to his level and tell him gently, touching his soft hair, "That's your great-aunt Catherine. She was incredibly kind and brave, and she would have loved you so very much." He nods seriously, processing this information, then goes back contentedly to his digging. Rebecca watches us from the kitchen window, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. But they're good tears now. Healing tears of acceptance. The truth was devastatingly painful. It tore apart comfortable illusions and forced us all to face horrible realities we wanted to ignore. But it also freed us from living a lie. And my precious grandson carries a name that honors goodness and truth and love, not lies and violence and tragedy. That's the legacy that truly matters. That's what I fought for. Catherine would be proud.